Hello, you absolute legends. In February of 2019, the speedrunner 4Shock Blast did something incredible. He beat the very first level in the original Doom hangar in 8 seconds. This was a monumental achievement, as the previous record of 9 seconds was set all the way back in 1998, more than 20 years earlier. Whenever these ancient records are broken, it's a very big deal. Truthfully, for a long time people weren't even sure if 8 was possible at all, let alone would actually be achieved. The man who originally set the record of 9 seconds back in 98 was a speedrunner by the name of Thomas Pilger, a bona fide Doom legend. In the late 90s, Thomas was king, and between the years of 97 and 99, he submitted hundreds of demos including the infamous Hangar 9. But there was another record that Thomas also achieved back in 1998 that is arguably just as important. Thomas didn't just set the world record for the first stage of Doom, he also set the world record for the first stage of Doom 2, Entryway. Entryway is a simple level. It consists of only a few turns and a single door that leads to the exit switch. Entryway is shorter than Hangar, and in 1998, Thomas beat Entryway in just 5 seconds. In fact, Entryway is so short and so simple that everyone was certain that this record would never be beaten. 5 seconds was the max, and as of 2024, everyone was right. It hadn't been beaten. 26 years later, a run of 5 seconds was still the best anyone had done, and it's entirely possible that this would have remained the case for a very, very long time if not for the insanity of a single speedrunner. When Shock achieved 8 seconds on Hangar, he had already proven that the impossible was possible before. So I guess if there was anyone who was crazy enough to even humor the possibility of getting a run of 4 seconds, it would be him. If you were to have asked any Doom speedrunner even just a year ago if 4 seconds was doable, they would have said no. But when 4Shock Blast decided to try and do the impossible once again, everything changed. And after more than a year of trial and error and practice and perfecting his movement, the impossible is exactly what 4Shock Blast did. On the 6th of April 2024, he beat Doom 2's first level entryway in just 4 seconds, beating a 26-year-old record in what is undoubtedly one of, if not the greatest Doom speedrun of all time. Which is very funny to say, given that it's also one of the shortest Doom speedruns ever. In today's video, we will learn how he did it and why it was untouchable for so many years. I really hope you enjoy. Hello legends, in this video I've partnered with Displate, who offer sleek metal posters that look amazing. I personally adore Displate, and I hang their posters on my walls because I want to celebrate the things I love. Trust me, if you really like a game or a movie and you put a Displate on your wall, it really makes your room feel so much better. Displate works with the biggest brands in media, including all of your favorite game, film, and TV franchises. Of course, Displates have always looked really good, but they have just came out with a brand new product called Textra. These feature premium print finishes, tactile textures, and 3D contours. I mean, with the 3D textures you can just see that it really does look incredible. Texture Finish brings so much life to your posters, and it's available on a huge selection of displays featuring the most important franchises. They are super easy to mount, and because of the magnet mounting system, you can keep swapping them to always keep things fresh. Displays are very affordable and ship extremely quickly. You'll receive yours in just 4 or 5 days. Please transform your walls today. Just click the link in the description and try Displate's new Textra posters. They really do look great. Entryway is a basic level. If I remove the monsters and just head to the exit, you can see that it merely consists of 3 90-degree turns, followed by a single door to the exit switch. Of course, there are other parts to the level, including some secrets, but today we are only talking about the speedruns that only requires you to get to the end of the level as fast as you can. And unless stated otherwise, these speedruns are always played on the ultra-violence difficulty. On the 27th of November 1995, the runner known as Demon Lord was the first documented person to beat the stage in 6 seconds. If you watched my video on the Doom 2 level Chasm, this is the very same Demon Lord that famously expressed his love for those annoying ledges. After achieving 6 seconds on Entryway, Demon Lord would exclaim in his notes, "This task can really drive you mad, and 5 isn't possible. If you do it, I'll eat a horse." Demon Lord's run was as primitive as it gets, but we do already see some semblance of strategy being implemented. a single shot from the pistol just as he passes the first zombie. You'd think this was just to shoot the zombie, but its real purpose is to alert the 3 zombies in the next hallway. If you look at the layout of these zombies, you'll immediately see that there is no clear path through them. If you want to speedrun this level, you'll need the enemies to get out of your way. If they don't, there is simply nothing you can do. The single pistol shot alerts those zombies, causing them to run in the direction of Doom Guy, and hopefully out of your way so you can run around. Unfortunately, enemy movement is determined by RNG, so most of the time they will still not cooperate. The first 2 zombies in the level are easy. They don't even see you coming. After the first corner, you need all 3 zombies to run towards the wall on the right, and you need the imp just behind them to not walk forward quickly and block the next corner. In the next hallway, there is another imp and zombie that will need to move out of the way as well. After this initial gauntlet of enemies, there is one final boss, a single imp in the exit room. If this imp decides he doesn't feel like letting you reach the exit switch, the run is dead. So despite the level being so short, there is a ton of luck required if you want to get through smoothly. I assume it's the monsters being major hurdles that made Demon Lord assume that 5 seconds wouldn't be possible, even though theoretically it's clearly doable. And that's probably also why it took a full 2.5 years for a speedrunner to actually do it. On the 30th of March 1998, Thomas Pilger became the first person to beat Entryway in 5 seconds. Clearly, some people were still skeptical that 5 was even possible at the time, as in Thomas's notes, he simply said, yes, it is possible. Pilger's run was a 5.97, a single frame under 6 seconds. And when you watch the run, there doesn't appear to be any major mistakes, no major stucks, no obvious time losses. In February of 2000, Adam W. would get a 5.91. This run also looks pretty smooth. Adam did implement a new strategy, however, at the end. As he opens the door, he fires his pistol. This alerts the imp, who will run towards the direction of Doom Guy. In this case, Adam fired while on the left side of the door, and then used the leftwards movement of the imp to run around the right. While there aren't any major errors in Adam's run, it's still clear that some time can be saved. Adam went very wide in the brown room, and he made contact with walls before the final door, which slowed him down dramatically. But how much time could realistically be saved? Well, if you were around in the early 2000s, and you wanted to know what was possible in Doom, generally the first group of people you'd look to would be the deathmatch players. In Doom Deathmatch, movement is king. The players who had the best movement would win the most matches. This is obvious, and you'd think it would translate directly to speedrunning. But there is a big difference between deathmatch and speedrunning. In speedrunning, you have enemies running around all over the place, and enemy behavior is governed by luck. A lot of people can't stand grinding for luck, and the deathmatch pros weren't any exception. If they wanted to practice or show off their movement skills and prove how fast they were, they didn't want to have to wait for enemies to give them permission to get through levels quickly. So instead, they just removed monsters completely. This way, there was no luck. It was simply the player's movement versus the level terrain. And this is how a lot of the deathmatch players speedran the game. In my video talking about Hanger, I brought up the fact that in 2001, deathmatch legend Ocelot beat Hanger in 8 seconds without monsters, showing that 8 seconds was at least theoretically possible. Also in 2001, Ocelot would play Entryway and achieve a time of 5.26. This run is extremely precise, but the interesting thing about this run that definitely needs to be pointed out is that Ocelot didn't use SR50 at all. SR50 is a much harder version of strafing that is slightly faster, but when you use it, you can't turn. I'm sure Ocelot could have implemented a bit of SR50 if he wanted to get a faster time, but even if he did, it wouldn't have mattered much. Entryway is so short, it's legitimately hard to find good opportunities to use it. You're not strafing for any more than a second before you have to turn. Ocelot's run of 5.26 does seem rather close to 4 though. Maybe SR50 would make the difference. Well, in 2002, another deathmatch legend known as Slasher would incorporate SR50 to achieve a 5.14. Clearly, SR50 had some impact, but only around 1/10 of a second or so. Slasher's run is honestly incredible, especially for the time. Just looking at it visually, you can tell it's extremely optimized. However, in saying that, just because it looks really good, that doesn't mean that it's perfect. For example, while Slasher did use SR50 throughout the run, he didn't use it as much as he could. There were still several frames where he was only using standard strafing, including the very beginning and very end of the run. This didn't have a massive impact though. At most, he probably only lost a single frame by not maximizing SR50. On top of this, Slasher could have also opened the door to the exit room one frame earlier. He was close enough to open it, but he pressed the use button a bit slow. But it does bear repeating that for 2002, this run is incredible. In fact, it was so good that it would take 15 years before anyone could do any better. The year is now 2017, and we're really starting to enter the modern age of Doom speedrunning, and none other than 4Shock Blast decided to play Entryway, just to try and beat Slasher's run without monsters. This time, of course, he would maximize his use of SR50 as much as possible, including at the very end. And he would also change the technique for approaching the exit room door, by using left strafe instead of right strafe. This doesn't seem to make sense intuitively, because you're facing away from the final door, so you have to spin around further to open it, but it's actually a bit more optimal in practice because of how momentum works in Doom. We can directly test this by using tools, by taking Slasher's run and splicing on Shock's exit room door technique, and it works out to be a full frame faster. Shock would be able to use this optimized door technique to get a 5.09. But still, this run wasn't perfect. In fact, there was a glaring error right at the beginning that you would never notice unless I told you about it. If we pause Shock's demo on the very first frame, we can see that he is facing directly forwards. This seems normal, as this is how Doom Guy starts any level. But any Doom speedrunner will tell you that this is a big mistake. In Doom speedrunning, there is something called a quick start. If we look at the first frame of Slasher's run, we can see that he is already turned, even on frame 1. By timing your inputs perfectly as the level loads, you can load into the level already facing the correct angle. This is considerably faster, because when you turn in Doom, you actually lose speed. And also your speed vector is already perfect from frame 1, so that's a benefit too. Because Shock was not able to execute the quick start in this run, he had to turn after he loaded into the level, which made him run slightly slower at the very beginning. And when I say a quick start is considerably faster, I mean somewhere between 1 to 2 frames, which is 0.03 or 0.06 seconds. In any other context, this wouldn't be a big deal, but in Entryway, where the run is already so optimized, this was a massive time loss. Despite this imperfection, Shock decided not to press the level any further. This task would be entrusted to the speedrunner Depravity. In January of 2020, Depravity managed to replicate Shock's run, however this time correctly implementing the quick start. This allowed him to achieve a 5.06. At this time, it now occurred to Depravity that he was awfully close to a 4-second run. At least in theory. Since Slasher's run of 5.14 in 2002, it had taken 18 years to save 3 frames. So the timeline wasn't looking very promising if you just looked at the progression. However, Depravity did have an ace up his sleeve that gave him just enough hope to dig a little deeper. There was a theoretical technique that could save 1 or maybe even 2 frames on previous runs. The technique is called momentum preservation, and it's one of the most precise tricks in Doom speedrunning. Usually when Doom Guy hits a wall, his momentum is destroyed. However, in certain circumstances, if you are running into a corner at the perfect angle, Doom Guy can keep his momentum fully even though he's not moving. Historically, this trick was only attempted on lifts. For example, in this clip here. Lifts are good places to try this because there is plenty of time to line up Doom Guy and also try several times before the lift reaches the top or bottom. Then, because Doom Guy has full momentum, the instant he can exit the lift, he will, and at full speed. There are also very rare instances where this was attempted on the corners between a wall and a door. But again, this example is rather special because there is so much time to line up the angle before you reach the door, and the movement is so simple. Trying to do something like this without a setup is almost impossible. It's certainly too precise to do intentionally with any consistency. Without a setup, without a way to give yourself time to line Doomguy up in just the right way, you would literally be hitting your head into the corner of a wall over and over and over again, and more or less hoping for the best, which is exactly what Depravity was insane enough to do. Entryway has a single door, and on that door, momentum preservation is possible. If you run into the corner of the door with the perfect angle, Doomguy can keep full speed and get through the door the instant it will allow him to do so. On top of that, because of the direction Doomguy is running through the door, he can even get 1 or 2 frames of wall run from the wall. Wall running is where you can get extra speed by running at the correct angle against a wall, but it's only possible in certain directions. In this case, this is going north, which does make it possible. All in all, a perfectly executed momentum preservation with wall run on the exit door can save up to 2 frames, or 0.06 seconds. It would take Depravity almost a month to get a half-decent run with a successful door trick, which would net him a time of 5.03, but both the movement and the end were ever so slightly suboptimal. Depravity would continue to press forward, and after 3 more months of grinding, in May of 2020, he would achieve this run. Depravity's run of 4 seconds on Entryway was undoubtedly one of, if not the most precise Doom speedruns ever performed in history, and it was a huge milestone. But let's not forget, for the past 10 minutes, I've been talking about how perfect and how difficult it is to get a run of 4 seconds without monsters. This took 26 years to do with no enemies to worry about. Without monsters, you can take the perfect line. You don't have to worry about enemies blocking your path or back boosting you. If 4 is so hard without monsters, how on earth is it supposed to be possible with so many of them standing in your way? If you asked any Doom speedrunner back in 2020, when Depravity got 4 seconds with no monsters, if a run of 4 seconds with monsters was possible, they would have said no. In fact, the fastest recorded run at that time was still a 5.49 achieved by Sedlow in 2012. After his run of 4 seconds, Depravity did go back and play Entryway in the ultraviolence category and managed to get a time of 5.29 a couple of weeks later. However, he figured that even if 4 was theoretically possible in some way, the grind would be far too long, so he left it there. In September of 2021, a speedrunner known as Dastan would be able to beat Depravity's mark with a 5.14. This run is really good, and it shows that if the enemies cooperate, you can run a very similar line to the runs without monsters. In his notes, Dastan proclaimed, "Potentially one of the cleanest runs I have ever done. I think that maybe 5.0x is doable with wall run or door boost, but I think that will remain to be tested by someone else who isn't afraid to lose what is left of their sanity." While you definitely can get a similar line to the no monster runs, the fact remains that needing to avoid the monsters does lose time. You will lose at least a couple of frames, because no matter how cooperative the monsters are, it's impossible for them to completely get out of the way. So the lines you can run in the no monster runs are different and are more optimal than those on ultraviolence. Therefore, even though 5.14 seems really close to a 4-second run, still at this point in time, even theoretically, people didn't think it was humanly possible. In early 2023, 4 Shock Blast would return to the level. His goal was just to beat Dastan's 5.14, and to test how low the record could reasonably go. To be clear, 4 seconds wasn't on his mind at all, or anyone's mind for that matter. But after playing the level for a while, something did change. Shock realized that even though the monsters did force him to take wider lines and thus lose time, the monsters also provided him an opportunity to use a technique that isn't possible without them. And this technique is called thing running. Thing running is essentially the same as wall running, but instead of using a wall to run against to build speed, you can use a thing. Things are solid objects that Doomguy can run up against, like barrels, but things can also be enemies. Usually thing running is done on barrels because barrels don't move, and on the Doom 2 map Barrels of Fun, players will brush up against the barrels to build speed. This extra speed even lets them jump over a gap that otherwise is too large to cross. Trying to do it on a monster is a pretty crazy idea. You'd have to hit the monster at the perfect angle, and because monsters are always moving around, the odds of it all coming together are extremely low. And even if you did brush up against a monster in the right way, as an object, they are so small that you'd only get 1 or 2 frames of thing running, which is a tiny amount and generally not worth the risk. The beginning of the fan-made map Nuts does show how it works though, but Entryway provides us a unique situation, because the very first monsters in the level aren't moving. They don't see us coming. We are running north, which is a direction that is compatible with wall running and thing running, and thus, if we were consistent with our movement and were able to hit the perfect angle, we could reliably use one of them to get some extra speed. In theory, we may be able to save 1 or even 2 frames. Shock was about a month into playing Entryway when he realized that thing running on the first zombie is something he could consistently do. Obviously, this does increase the difficulty, because you really have to be perfect with your movement to hit the zombie at the necessary angle and distance, but Shock was good enough to do it. With this extra frame or 2 gained from thing running on the first zombie, this offsets some of the time lost due to having to go around other monsters later in the level. It was at this point that the unthinkable started creeping into Shock's mind. Maybe, just maybe, 4 seconds is humanly viable. I can't overstate just how much more difficult 4 would be with monsters than without. Without monsters, all we needed was perfect movement and then a good execution of the door trick. With monsters, we need to also worry about thing running off the first zombie, and we needed all of the zombies to move perfectly out of the way. In order to help with enemy movement, Shock did 3 specific shots. One at the very beginning, the same one that had been around since 1995. He then did a second shot again very soon after. This is to alert the zombie in the third hallway to make him move closer to the wall on the right. And then at the end, he did a shot while on the right side of the exit door to lure the imp away so he could do the exit room door trick on the left side, similar to what Adam W did back in 2000. Shock would work on Entryway throughout 2023, and by October, he was close. Really, really close. In fact, on the 20th of October 2023, Shock achieved this run. This was a run of 5 seconds flat, Shock's first ever. Clearly, 4 seconds was on the horizon. But despite being only 1 frame away, when we are talking about requiring the most precise Doom speedrun of all time, that's a long, long way. It was around this time that I personally found out that Shock was going for 4 seconds. I was elated because ever since 2019, I have been making jokes in the Doom speedrunning Discord, asking when someone was going to do it so that I could make a video. And it was never supposed to actually happen, but now, incredibly, it seemed inevitable. All Shock needed was a perfect run. And after 6 more months and over 100,000 attempts, 26 years after Thomas Pilger first achieved 5 seconds in the late 90s, on the 6th of April 2024, 4 Shock Blast achieved this run. This run exemplifies modern Doom speedrunning. If you showed the ancient Doom players this demo, they would have never believed this was a human actually playing. It's more or less a perfect run, implementing the hardest strategies. For the second time in history, 4 Shock Blast had beaten a classic Thomas Pilger demo, and both times for the very first level of the game. You couldn't ask for a better storyline. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what speedrunning is all about. A community spending decades optimizing a 5-second speedrun on a game that is now 30 years old. And personally, I'm all for it. A huge congratulations to Shock for this achievement. Thank you so much for watching, you legends. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.